Welcome back to another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm your host, Steven Roy Goodman. I'm here in Colby-Sawyer College in New London, New Hampshire. And Colby-Sawyer has a special program with the country of Nepal, and we're going to hear about that today. So special thanks to UDC-TV and to Colby-Sawyer College, and we're now going to hear about Colby-Sawyer College and Nepal.
I'm just so pleased that we have such a large number of Nepali students at Colby-Sawyer College. We've had them here for approximately 7 years. Right now we have a little over 40 students studying in all kinds of different majors: business, public health, nursing, the arts, communications. And one of the exciting things is that these students add such a dynamic dimension to our academic programs. We have students, American students, who are working with them, going over to Nepal and coming back. We have, for the past 3 years, we've been working with a school in the Annapurna region, which is a school for marginalized children, the Maya Universe School. And we've been sending a team over each year to do volunteer work, build buildings and classrooms and do workshops. And last year, after the April 25th earthquake, we had to respond effectively, and we just went back a couple months ago to do relief work in Gorkha, which was the epicenter of the earthquake, and do work with schools and people out that way, as well as the Maya Universe School. So it's been great having these students here. They're doing wonderful work. They're graduating, getting good jobs both in the U.S. and in Nepal at their home areas. So we're just so pleased, and we look forward to continued work. And as you can see, there's so much energy and enthusiasm that these students bring to campus.
Well, Rakshya, you're from Kathmandu, but you went to high school in Boston. Mm-hmm. Can you say how your family got from Kathmandu to Boston, and now you're up in New Hampshire?
Yeah, sure. So my dad was already here before, and so he decided to get all of us over here for better education, obviously. So I moved here when I was 15 years. So I was in my sophomore year of high school. So from Nepal, obviously, coming here, it was a whole change, like a big one. I was in school and I was the only Nepali there, so it was like alien, you know. People used to ask me, where are you from? And I was like, I'm from Nepal. So people didn't know where it was. I always had to tell them, like, it's here, you know, like give them some geography. I always had to tell them it's between China, India, and they were like, really? And then it was really hard. Like before, I felt like I didn't know anything, you know, like even though we were fluent in language, but still it was like, I don't know how to speak. I don't have any friends, you know. You have to start it all over again. Whatever you had learned before, it was again adapting to a new life and relearning it again all over.
Is there something that the colleges or universities could do in the United States that could help bridge the cultural gap between students like you who are maybe losing some tie to their home country and the American culture?
I guess like how we have these festivals and stuff, that helps us in order to like be attached to our own roots, and then also the people from our same background. Because in Colby-Sawyer, like, to be honest, I was the only Nepali in my high school, so I was kind of like, I wasn't in touch with Nepali people at all for like 3 years, to be honest. It was just my parents, and then when I came here, it was like going back to the roots again.
So you mentioned the club that you lead. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about that club?
CrossCultural Club is one of the biggest clubs on campus. Basically, all the students from different countries, including the United States, we all come together and then we share our different cultures. And then there is International Festival, which is hosted by the CrossCultural Club. It's also one of the biggest events on campus, and it's tonight. So all the different countries, they set up tables. We have food from different countries. We have talent shows where participants from different cultures get the time to show off their, you know, cultural dances, songs, and different stuff. So, yeah.
And you're going to be part of this because you're the chair of this thing.
Yes, I have to just run after this interview and prepare for the National Festival.
So Prithul, you're the president of the student government and obviously very engaged in the community here. I'm assuming you've thought about your future and thought about your time in the United States and your time in Nepal. Maybe if you could say a word or two about what you're planning to do in the future.
I'd like to stay in the United States for a couple of years so that I can finish my MBA before I go back to Nepal. And yes, I'm definitely going back to Nepal. I think the country needs youth like us who have that knowledge and a different set of skill to run the economy of the country. Has gone backward, and this has also brought several people back to Nepal because they have seen the opportunities over there. So my plan for now is to complete my MBA after my schooling over here, and then going back to Nepal and doing something, starting up my own company or doing something over there.
And Michelle, is there something that you think would be an interesting message to leave American viewers with?
I feel that the Nepalese community is very caring and involved in their clubs here, and they eat with their hands, which I thought was very interesting. We had a dinner party, and I asked Prithul, how do we do this? And he said, put away the forks, and we dug right in, and it was such a great experience, and they're just wonderful human beings to be around.
Well, fair enough. And why don't we wrap up with one question? Besides the way we eat, so Prithul, what are some of the things that you would like the American community to know about Nepal that perhaps they don't?
I think the first thing I want people to know about is Nepal is a beautiful place, and it depends upon tourism. And there's several tourists who come to Nepal every year, but I'd like people to look at Nepal on the internet, see how beautiful it is, and visit there, because that's main source of income for all the Nepalese people. So I think I'd say American viewers to have that opportunity to go to Nepal.
And do you want Americans to get involved in things other than tourism? Not that there's anything wrong with hiking in the Himalayas, but how do you want people, Americans, and particularly graduates of Colby-Sawyer or other colleges, to get involved in, let's say, the business community?
I think there are lots of opportunities back in Nepal in terms of trade and in terms of volunteering activities. It can be a doctor or a nurse who can go there and spend few weeks over there and realize like how beautiful the country is and how thankful the people of Nepal are. And I think I'd really encourage people to grab those opportunities.
Well, I'm here with Ayla Cordell, who's a freshman at Colby-Sawyer College. Ayla, can you say a little bit about your background? You're an American student, but you're interested in Nepal, and I understand that you're of Turkish descent and also American descent as well.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in cultures, having grown up in kind of this cross-cultural household. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, who are both from Turkey. My mom is Turkish. And so I've always been exposed a little bit to other cultures, a European way of life. And so the opportunity to travel to Asia, to somewhere I've never been before with such a foreign culture, was immediately appealing to me.
And what happened to you when you got there?
It was such a culture shock. I remember driving to the hotel on the wrong side of the road, pulling a U-turn in the middle of the road with cars coming and not stopping, and just feeling overwhelmed. But I mean, it was amazing. A culture so rich in history that's had to constantly evolve and was partly destroyed in the earthquake and has had to rebuild itself in a way that's really incredible.
Well, as you know, being of Turkish descent, history is something that's never really too far behind. And as we know from history of Nepal, I mean, Nepal went through a very vicious civil war for about 10 years. What did you see of the remnants of the civil war when you were there?
I'm not sure I really even was thinking about that, because the earthquake was so fresh in my mind. It was more looking at that destruction, and we would see temples that were built so long ago that were now just complete rubble, and and houses of families in a village that were completely destroyed, and it's very sobering. It's a very sobering experience to see all that kind of stuff.
Sure. And what did you do when you were there to help people rebuild?
Well, it was actually really sad because you would walk through the village and people would ask, "Are you here to rebuild my house? Please help me." Nobody's helping us. And you felt terrible because, I mean, we're only there for 2 weeks. We didn't come prepared with plans to help rebuild houses, but you know that these people need it so much. So we did what we could, and we bought them supplies and food and snacks at a convenience store, and just to try and ease in their lives up just a bit, even though like we couldn't do all that we wanted to.
Well, that raises an interesting question because, you know, a lot of American universities send students to not only to Nepal, but all over the world. And one of the fair questions, I think, is, you know, what does it end up doing for that country? So how do you think that Nepal was better than it was when you got there?
I think it brought a certain hope. Although materially and structurally we weren't able to do all these things by visiting and talking to the people and letting them tell their stories, visiting the school and working with the children. I know that even though I was struck with the destruction and felt upset by it, I also felt this underlying current of hope that kind of stuck with me throughout the whole trip, and I think we gave, or the people gave us as well.
Well, that's an interesting point because a lot of times people often say that stories of regular people, quote unquote regular people, aren't always told enough. And did you experience that as well?
Yeah, it was one of the other members who went on the trip is making a documentary, and so he questioned a lot of people saying, what's been happening after the earthquake? What do you need? Do you think you're getting it? And so many people who hadn't had a chance to say before were finally saying, we're not getting what we need. We don't have homes. We need to support our families, and we're not getting the supplies. We're not getting our homes rebuilt. And these are entire communities of people. And it was kind of crazy to hear all that.
And I first of all, thank you for sharing all this very intimate thing. But in terms of people feeling that they don't really have hope, are there specific things that you would like Colby-Sawyer or other colleges to do that would help bring more hope to people in Nepal?
Well, I think it's really great that we already have this connection with Nepal. I mean, I didn't think coming to a small liberal arts New Hampshire college that we would be having this unbreakable bond with a foreign country. And so I think having that and having the diversity here of all the Nepali students is something already really great. I think something we need to do is to continue this trip. I know when we visited the school and the day we left, a lot of the children said, you have to come back. And I said, don't worry, I will. And they said, people always say that and they don't come back. And I think that's something that has to happen because the trip has done good things and it has brought a lot of hope, and I think especially post-earthquake that needs to continue, and if we can find any way to maybe do some rebuilding of homes, just to do more, I guess.
Well, fair enough. And last question, if I may, is when you speak to other American students about your experiences in Nepal, are there things that you wish that they would listen to more, or things that you wish you maybe would share more?
I think it's hard because you can never really share that experience, the feeling of standing in the middle of a street in Kathmandu and there are bikes and cars going around you, this perpetual honking noise, so many people. You can't describe that feeling to someone. But I think a lot of times at least when people hear Nepal, they think, oh, earthquake destruction. And that's important to recognize that there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done, but I think they also need to know what a beautifully rich culture they have and how the people are so hopeful and so kind and so appreciative, and that although there has been destruction, the culture is surviving and will thrive forever.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. are there particular things in the field of biology that particularly interest you and that you think would be applicable back in Nepal?
There are a lot of areas that we can apply in Nepal. I'm involved in one of the project which basically aims to educate villagers in remote part of the Nepal about lead acid poisoning. And because what's happening in remote place of Nepal is they use solar panels and then they use lead acid batteries to store the energy, and what it has brought is people are exposed to lead acid poisoning, because what they do is they break the seal of the lead acid batteries and then melt the lead and then make utensils and other stuff that can be beneficial for their daily purpose. So it's the biology education that actually aware me of such issue, and then and motivated me to go back to my country and then use the knowledge that I have. So I like to explore different areas, molecular biology, developmental biology. Right now, I mean my fate is not yet it's called in biology, the fate progressively narrows down as you develop. So I'm at early stage where my fate has not been differentiated.
Well, Nabu, maybe if we could start with you. I believe you're the only student we've talked to today who's from the mountains.
True.
Well, what's it like to grow up in the mountains?
Well, I would say it's kind of similar to living in New Hampshire, in New London in particular, because as a child who was grown up over there, I remember playing with snow, especially for 3 months, just the way it is over here. And but the density of the snow over here is a little bit intense than what I used to face over there. So in terms of say infrastructure and everything, obviously there's a vast difference from where I grew up and in comparison to New London, and obviously that matters, that varies a lot. But as a kid who grew up over there, I think I find a lot of differences in terms of educational opportunities, in terms of infrastructures, and as a society in general, it's a little bit different.
And if we could speak to that issue of the differences a little bit, what was your schooling like, particularly I assume you were somewhere high up in the Himalayas.
Exactly, yeah, that's true. Speaking of with the educational system, up in the mountains where I grew up, educational system is totally different than rest of the part of the country. Whereas in Kathmandu, you could say mostly privatized schools, boarding schools, which I didn't get the chance to study until later phase of educational opportunities. So as a child, I think mostly schools in there are private, not privatized, and they're owned by government schools, government. So I studied there till grade 7 in a government school, and then got an opportunity to study in private school later in Kathmandu. So that was a kind of a transition. But if we have to talk about specifically in terms of education, it's a little bit kind of separate from rest of the country, and the opportunities that we get and stuff like that.
Well, fair enough. And in terms of, you referenced the transition or the differences with Kathmandu. So when you were a student in Kathmandu, had you ever encountered any students from the mountains?
No. The students who were there in Kathmandu, they mostly grew up there. So the schools that I went to, that they didn't have a lot of people from outside. So I have no experience with people outside of Kathmandu.
So you had to come all the way to New Hampshire to experience somebody from your own country in the mountains.
That's true.
And speaking of that, so there's a whole community of people from Nepal here.
Yes.
Maybe both of you could talk, if you don't mind, you could say a word or two about what's the community like, and does it make you feel better that there is a community here?
that played a great role in me coming here because a senior from my high school who graduated from my high school, he studies here and he's a junior here. So him being here was like a great support for me. He provided me with the information and he told me about the community of Nepali people who's here. So I guess that like it was comforting for me to come here and still have like someone to talk to in my own language and to communicate with. So I guess, yeah, that played a great role, having Nepali students here, the Nepali community, you can say.
Yeah, pretty much it's same scenario in my case though, because I had two of my high school seniors who were here at ColbySawyer already, when I was accepted the first time over here, I had lots of questions, and I used to ask these guys like what it's like to live in ColbySawyer and like what's the environment like, and it's pretty much what they studies like, you know, the majors and like what are the opportunities there. I asked tons of these questions, and they were really helpful in terms of like, you know, getting this information out to me, especially because that was a huge transition. Like as a kid who grew up in the place where there was nothing to the high-tech transformation to US, to like an educational opportunities over here. It was a very big deal for me, and these guys were a great support.
Maybe I could ask you about American mountains. Have you hiked any of the American mountains?
That's a really good question, actually. Okay, I remember typically saying this to one of my American friends who thought like, you know, there's a Kearsarge mountain like right over there, and like, you know, there was a mountain day, and mountain day. There's a mountain day at ColbySawyer. So when they say the mountain day, I asked, where's the mountain? Like, where are you gonna hike the mountain? I don't see any mountains. And he was like, okay, there are mountains right there. That's not what we call mountain in there. Like, you know, it's just like a hill. You know, just a little hills that in our country is just like, yeah, you know, the place I'm from, the mountains are like really, really tall, and it's like mostly covered with snow all over. And it was like, yeah, maybe, you know, that might be true and stuff like that. So, yeah, you would, okay, there's a lot of difference in terms of mountains, like from where I grew up and like, I mean, from where I am from and like in New London, it's a big deal, like big difference, I would say, yeah.
Terrific, well, thank you both. I'm here with Chris Gagne from Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Chris, welcome.
Hi.
Well, Chris, thank you. So you are from the famous Bretton Woods.
Yeah, I live on the resort itself, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I've been there since I was like 4 years old. It's home to me.
Well, fair enough. So what is your experience here, and how did you get involved in Nepal?
Well, I joined the honors program here as soon as I signed up when I was a freshman. And I knew that we always had a really big Nepali community. And I guess what impacted me the most was April 25th, when we all woke up that Saturday morning and we found out an earthquake had hit the country. And we have such a big Nepali community here that everyone, no matter what race or country you come from, we were all so affected by it. And we had a candlelight vigil outside the dining hall. And that's kind of when I knew that I wanted to really do something to help. And I knew that they were taking these annual trips in January to go out and tour their home country and do what they could in terms of volunteer work to help people who were struggling, and I decided I wanted to do that.
And you did?
And I did.
And can you tell us a little bit about your experience when you were in Nepal?
I mean, it was my first time leaving the country, and I'd never experienced real hardship like that before. I mean, as soon as we got to Kathmandu, I saw so much evidence of how the earthquake impacted the country. Monuments that had been standing for centuries were just wiped out, and people were just sitting in the streets asking for money. There was just so much, and the hardest part, I guess, was how little we could do with so little time and how little finances what we had. But we did what we could. You know, we bought food supplies for villagers out in the rural parts out west, and we tutored some children at the school we went to, Maya Academy, and it was the most transformational moment of my entire life.
Well, that's interesting. And what would you, because, you know, one of your colleagues also mentioned that it was a very transformational moment as well, and also mentioned that perhaps it would have been better if there was more time. So assuming you go back to Nepal and had more time or have more time, what would you like to do when you go back?
Well, one of the things that we really wanted to do but didn't have time to do is just build homes, because the way it stands right now, so many of the villagers just lost their entire homes because they weren't built to withstand earthquakes and they just came toppling down. And when we went out to the rural regions, one of the things that the people living there asked us the most was, could you take some time to help us rebuild our homes? And we just couldn't, because we were only there for 2 weeks and we didn't have the time and we didn't have the money either. So if I were to go back, it would have to be for a longer period, like a month, and we'd stay out in one part and just help people rebuild their homes.
And fair enough. And would you recommend to students who have no ties to Nepal to go to Nepal or go to a more developed country first? Or do you think the transition is going to be too stark?
Like I said, it was my first time living in the country, so I've never been to any other developed nation either. It was really weird, on a side note, just flying over Europe at night and looking down and not being able to go. But, you know, even though it was a very sudden change, both, you know, in time zone and physical location, and also just, it was a little stressful for my first time out of the country to go somewhere so far away and so foreign. I would recommend it to absolutely anyone who wanted to go, because it's so eye-opening to see, you know, how much you take for granted yourself in your own life.
Well, I think that's a fair point, and maybe I'll just ask one more question, and if I may say one thing, there are a lot of Americans who have not been to a place like Nepal, and if you made it from Bretton Woods to Nepal, and you're standing here and you survived and thrived there, I'm very happy to say that perhaps other Americans could do the same. And so my question to you is, what message would you like to give to them when they're maybe scared to go?
I would say that it's necessary to go even if you're scared, and I was very scared, but you have to go in order to understand how the world works. You can't pretend to know about the world and not see it with your own eyes, you know.
Well said. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank all the students from Colby-Sawyer who've taken the time to share their thoughts and experiences about Nepal. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. If you would like additional information about Colby-Sawyer College, please visit www.colby-sawyer.edu. And thank you to you, our viewers, for joining us for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.